At the edge of the Arabian Sea, there are places where a river should still be visible, but is not. The land is flat, and the horizon is wide. Mudflats shine beneath a white sky, while channels twist through mangrove forests toward the coast. Fishing boats rest beside villages that once depended on fresh water arriving from far beyond the mountains. But in many seasons, the flow reaching this delta is weak, irregular, or overwhelmed by the sea. Salt moves inland, fields lose fertility, wells turn brackish, islands shrink. Families who inherited a life beside the river discover that a river can disappear without changing its name on the map. More than 3,000 kilometers upstream, that same river crashes through some of the highest mountains on Earth. It gathers snowmelt, glacier melt, rain, and tributaries. It cuts through rock, powers turbines, fills reservoirs, feeds canals, grows crops, supplies cities, and supports a nation of roughly 250 million people. This is the Indus, the river around which Pakistan was built. It is not simply a feature of the landscape, it is the country's central organizing force, connecting mountains, plains, deserts, cities, and coast through one immense system of dependence. That system is under pressure, but the phrase, "a river running dry," needs explanation. The Indus is not about to vanish from its source to the sea in one dramatic event. The reality is slower, more uneven, and in many ways more dangerous. A canal can carry water, while a farm at its tail receives almost none. A city can stand inside a great river basin, while families buy water from tankers. A river can appear full at a barrage, yet fail to reach the delta. Water can remain underground while becoming too deep, salty, polluted, or expensive to use. Pakistan can also face catastrophic floods inside the same system. In 2022, extraordinary monsoon rains and flooding affected about 33 million people and killed more than 1,700. Villages became islands, roads disappeared, fields turned into inland seas. For weeks, the world saw a country overwhelmed by water. Yet floodwater did not become dependable drinking water, secure irrigation, or a healthy river. In some places, it remained trapped and contaminated. In others, it rushed away. The next dry season could still bring a failed pump, an empty channel, or salt moving farther into the delta. How can a country drown while its river is running dry? Because flood and scarcity are not opposites. They can be different expressions of the same broken relationship with water. Too much in the wrong place, too little where it is needed, and too little capacity to carry abundance safely from one season into the next. The Indus is being divided, diverted, pumped, polluted, trapped behind dams, and forced to serve more farms, factories, cities, and people than ever before. Climate change is making its timing less predictable, while inequality decides who feels each shortage first. Pakistan owes its agriculture, much of its economy, and part of its identity to this river system. The more completely the country depends on it, the more dangerous every weakness becomes. To understand that contradiction, begin where the water begins. The Indus rises on the Tibetan plateau, in a world of thin air, rock, ice, and extraordinary distance. It flows west through the highlands of Ladakh and then enters the mountain region of Gilgit-Baltistan. Here, the river is still young, but the landscape around it is ancient and immense. The Himalaya, Karakoram, and Hindu Kush converge across a region holding thousands of glaciers, deep valleys, unstable slopes, and peaks that seem to rise directly from the river. In these northern mountains, water is stored in forms that do not resemble a reservoir. It is held in winter snow, glacier ice, frozen ground, high-altitude lakes, and the seasonal rhythm of temperature. When spring and summer arrive, snow begins to melt, glaciers release water, mountain streams gather force and descend toward the Indus. This frozen storage is essential because much of the lower basin receives limited rainfall. Pakistan's great agricultural plains are not sustained by monsoon rain alone. They depend on water arriving from mountains hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away. The river moves past some of the most dramatic geography on Earth. Near the Great Bend at Nanga Parbat, it cuts through a landscape of extreme relief. Roads cling to cliffs. Settlements occupy narrow terraces above the current. Suspension bridges connect communities separated by water that is both lifeline and threat. Farther downstream, the river reaches Tarbela, where one of the world's largest earth and rock-filled dams blocks its path. The reservoir behind it stores water for irrigation, helps control floods, and supports major hydropower generation. Below Tarbela, the river leaves the high mountains and enters a different Pakistan. The valleys widen. The current becomes part of a managed system. Barrages raise the water level and direct it into canals. Tributaries arriving from the east join the basin. The Kabul River enters near Attock. Farther south, the waters of the Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, and Sutlej are gathered through canals, barrages, and confluences before reaching the Indus. This network crosses the provinces of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Punjab, Sindh, and Balochistan through both natural rivers and engineered channels. It passes farms, villages, towns, industrial zones, wetlands, deserts, and some of the fastest-growing cities in Asia. By the time the Indus reaches the sea, almost every drop has entered a political, economic, or ecological argument. The river gave its name to one of the world's earliest urban civilizations. More than 4,000 years ago, cities such as Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa rose within the greater Indus region. Their builders created planned streets, standardized bricks, wells, drainage systems, workshops, storage areas, and long-distance trade networks. Mohenjo-Daro, now in Sindh, remains one of the most extraordinary archaeological landscapes on Earth. From above, its streets form a geometry of baked brick beneath the sun. At ground level, wells and drains reveal a civilization deeply concerned with the movement of water. The people who lived there left no political history that can be read with certainty. Their script remains undeciphered. We do not know what they called their rulers, cities, or rivers. But their infrastructure tells us something important. In the Indus region, civilization has always depended on managing water that can nourish and destroy. The basin's rivers shift, floodplains move, channels fill with sediment. Monsoon rain can arrive violently or fail. A settlement close enough to benefit from the river may also be close enough to drown. Mohenjo-Daro survived for centuries, but the wider urban system eventually declined. Scholars continue to debate the combination of changing river courses, climate shifts, trade disruption, and social transformation involved. There is no simple story in which one drought ended an entire civilization. The more useful lesson is that even a sophisticated society can become vulnerable when the environmental systems supporting it change faster than its institutions can adapt. Pakistan inherited this ancient relationship between water and power. Its name is modern, but the regions within it carry identities shaped by rivers. Punjab, means the land of five waters. Its historical landscape was defined by the Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Beas, and Sutlej. Between these rivers lay the Dobes, the lands between two waters, each with its own soils, settlements, and agricultural patterns. Sindh is even more directly bound to the Indus. The province takes its name from the river's ancient identity. Here, the Indus has created a narrow green corridor through dry land before spreading toward the delta. For centuries, towns, shrines, forts, farms, and trading communities developed beside its changing channels. The river also shaped movement and belief. Sufi saints settled along routes connected by water and trade. Pilgrims traveled to shrines. Boatmen carried goods and people. Pastoral communities moved between floodplains and dry lands. Fisher families reed the river through currents, birds, reeds, and seasonal changes. The Indus was not only a supply line, it was a cultural landscape. Follow that landscape from north to south, and Pakistan changes almost completely while remaining connected by water. In the high valleys, villages cling to slopes above rivers the color of stone and ice. Apricot trees bloom beneath snow peaks. Terraced fields occupy every piece of level ground. Houses are built from materials that can survive cold winters, dry air, earthquakes, and isolation. Languages and traditions shift from valley to valley because mountains separate communities even when rivers connect them. The Karakoram Highway follows part of this world, crossing a landscape where road building is a permanent negotiation with rock, water, and gravity. Trucks move beneath unstable cliffs. Rivers roar below. Old routes that once carried traders, pilgrims, armies, and ideas now carry tourists, construction materials, fuel, fruit, and families traveling toward cities. Farther south, the land opens into the Potohar Plateau and then the Punjab Plain. The horizon becomes agricultural. Villages gather around mosques, markets, schools, and stands of trees. Brick kilns rise beside roads. Tractors share space with motorcycles, animal carts, buses, and brightly painted trucks. Water changes the color of the country. Beside a canal, fields can appear intensely green. A few kilometers away, dry ground reveals what the climate would look like without irrigation. The border between abundance and scarcity may be no more than a gate, a channel, and the decision of when to open it. Lahore grew near the Ravi as a city of gardens, forts, mosques, bazaars, colleges, workshops, and imperial ambition. The Mughal rulers who shaped much of its historic center understood water as architecture. Gardens were divided by channels. Fountains cooled courtyards. Reflection pools turned buildings into images. Water represented order, paradise, and royal power. Today, the Ravi near Lahore cannot carry that symbolism without also carrying the burden of a modern metropolis. Wastewater, reduced flow, industry, and urban expansion have changed the river. The city's memory remains connected to water even as its daily supply comes largely from underground. Southwest of Lahore, Multan rises from the hot plain near the Chenab. Its shrines, blue pottery, bazaars, mangoes, and dense old streets belong to a landscape where summer heat can feel almost physical. Water here is shade, survival, agriculture, and hospitality. A glass offered to a traveler carries meaning because everyone understands the climate outside. Beyond the irrigated fields, Cholistan stretches toward the Indian border in dunes, scrub, old caravan routes, and the remains of settlements once connected to channels that shifted or vanished. Derawar Fort rises above the desert as if built from the color of the ground itself. Its massive walls reveal another truth about the basin. Water does not simply create cities. When rivers change course, cities can lose the geography that sustained them. In Sindh, the Indus becomes wider, slower, and more visibly central. The river passes agricultural lands, wetlands, and historic settlements before reaching Succa. From the barrage, long gates extend across the water, while canals spread outward into the province. Nearby, the river island of Bukur, the old riverfront of Rohri. Bridges, shrines, and boats show how engineering and history occupy the same view. Downstream, the landscape carries the visual language of Sindh. Ajrak patterns, embroidered cloth, glazed tiles, caps, wooden boats, date palms, mud walls, and shrines where music can continue late into the night. At Sehwan, the shrine of Lal Shahbaz Qalandar attracts pilgrims from across social and regional boundaries. The river nearby is not the subject of every prayer, but it is part of the geography that made movement, gathering, and exchange possible. Food also follows water. Wheat becomes roti, rice becomes biryani and pulao, sugarcane becomes sweetness in tea and markets. Milk from animals fed on irrigated fodder becomes yogurt, butter, and lassi. Mango orchards depend on carefully timed irrigation. Cotton moves from fields into ginning factories, spinning mills, looms, export warehouses, and clothing worn far beyond Pakistan. A river can therefore enter a household without appearing in a glass. It is present in bread, fabric, electricity, fruit, employment, and the price of food. This dependence extends beyond the green plains. The Thar Desert receives monsoon rain unevenly and contains communities adapted to scarcity, livestock, drought, and seasonal migration. Canal projects and groundwater have changed parts of the desert, but water quality and access remain uneven. In Balochistan, ancient underground channels known as kares once moved groundwater gently from uplands towards settlements without continuous pumping. Many have declined as tube wells lowered water tables, yet they preserve a different engineering philosophy. Take water at the speed the landscape can replace it. Pakistan is often described through contrasts: mountain and desert, village and megacity, Punjabi and Sindhi, coast and plateau. The Indus does not erase these differences. It makes their interdependence visible. A cotton field in Punjab can support a textile worker in Faisalabad and an exporter in Karachi. Electricity generated in the north can power pumps in the plains. Wheat grown beside a canal can feed a family in Quetta. Decisions at a barrage in one province can affect a fisherman near the sea in another. The river turns geography into a national supply chain, yet the Indus Pakistan depends on today is not a natural system flowing freely from mountain to sea. It is one of the most engineered river basins on the planet. The transformation accelerated under British colonial rule. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, administrators and engineers expanded canals across Punjab and Sindh on a vast scale. Water was diverted into dry or seasonally watered land. New agricultural settlements, often called canal colonies, were created. Roads, railways, markets, and planned towns followed irrigation. The results were dramatic. Areas that had supported grazing, scrub, or limited farming became major producers of wheat, cotton, and other crops. The colonial state gained revenue. Commercial agriculture expanded. Soldiers and cultivators were settled on newly irrigated land. Entire social landscapes were reorganized around canal commands. Engineering maps presented this as the conquest of waste. Land without permanent cultivation was often described as empty, unproductive, or waiting to be improved. But those landscapes were not truly empty. Pastoralists used them. Communities held customary rights. Seasonal movement had its own logic. When canals fixed water to particular fields, they also fixed power to particular owners. This pattern still matters. Irrigation can create wealth while deciding who receives it. A canal may look like neutral infrastructure, but its route, schedule, maintenance, and outlet sizes distribute opportunity. Farmers near the head of a channel often have advantages over those at the tail. Large landholders may possess more influence than small farmers. Official water rights may be equal on paper, while access differs in practice. The system became even more politically sensitive in 1947, when British India was divided into India and Pakistan. Partition created two countries across one connected river basin. Political borders cut through canals, headworks, railways, villages, and markets that had been designed as parts of a single system. Some canal sources lay in India, while the fields they served lay in Pakistan. The new states had just experienced mass migration, communal violence, institutional collapse, and the displacement of millions. Water immediately became a question of national survival. Temporary agreements prevented a complete breakdown, but distrust remained. The problem was not merely technical. Each country feared that dependence on water, controlled beyond its border, could become a strategic vulnerability. After years of negotiation, India and Pakistan signed the Indus Waters Treaty in 1960, with the World Bank playing a facilitating role. The arrangement divided the river system in a way unusual for international water agreements. The three eastern rivers, Ravi, Beas, and Sutlej, were allocated mainly to India. The three western rivers, Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab, were allocated mainly to Pakistan, while the treaty allowed specified uses by each country on rivers assigned to the other. For Pakistan, the agreement required a massive physical reconstruction of water supply. Canals had to transfer water from the western rivers toward areas that had previously depended on the eastern rivers. Dams, barrages, and link canals were built as part of the Indus Basin project. Mangla Dam rose on the Jhelum. Tarbela followed on the Indus. A web of infrastructure redirected the basin across the new national geography. This was one of the great engineering achievements of the 20th century. It helped protect Pakistan's irrigated agriculture after partition and created major hydropower capacity. It also deepened the country's dependence on centralized control, large structures, and constant maintenance. The Indus Basin irrigation system became one of the largest connected irrigation networks in the world. From the air, its logic appears almost geometric. Barrages cross rivers in long lines. Main canals branch into smaller canals. Distributaries divide again. Watercourses carry the flow toward fields. Across Punjab and Sindh, green agricultural zones extend into landscapes that would otherwise be far drier. On the ground, the geometry becomes a human schedule. Water is commonly delivered through a rotation known as warabandi. Farmers receive assigned periods, but the amount arriving depends on river flow, maintenance, sediment, unauthorized diversions, local influence, and the farm's position within the network. Consider a representative household near the tail of a distributary in southern Punjab or Sindh. The family knows the official night and hour when water should arrive. Seed has been purchased. Fertilizer may be on credit. A crop is already counting time in heat. A gate opens upstream, and the canal begins to move. Before the flow reaches the family, some is diverted, some seeps through the channel, some escapes through damaged banks, and some never enters the branch because the system is operating below its intended supply. The farmer waits beside a dry watercourse after dark. One family member clears weeds from the channel, while another carries drinking water back to the house. A pump stands ready to draw groundwater if the canal fails. The crop cannot understand that its water has entered an argument about infrastructure and power. When the flow finally arrives, the family must spread it quickly. Some water reaches the roots, some evaporates, some drains below the crop zone. Where groundwater is fresh, that seepage may recharge an aquifer. Where the water table is already high and saline, it can worsen waterlogging and salt damage. This is the daily reality hidden inside national statistics. Pakistan may receive a measured volume of river water, but a household survives on timing, location, quality, and control. The irrigation system made large-scale agriculture possible, and agriculture remains central to Pakistan's employment, exports, and food security. Wheat is the basic staple. Rice is consumed and exported. Cotton supports the textile economy. Sugarcane feeds mills. Fruit, vegetables, fodder, maize, and pulses fill other parts of the landscape. But the relationship between crops and water is increasingly difficult. Rice and sugarcane can demand large quantities, especially in hot areas, using flood irrigation. Cotton remains vulnerable to heat, pests, and changing rainfall, while wheat depends heavily on irrigation across much of the country. Farmers do not choose crops according to water alone. They respond to support prices, nearby mills, export demand, credit, transport, land conditions, tradition, and the need to repay debt. A farmer may accept the logic of a less thirsty crop and still plant sugarcane because a mill offers the only dependable buyer. This is why blaming farmers misses the structure around them. The system rewards production more clearly than conservation. Canal charges often do not reflect exact use, while groundwater pumping is limited mainly by energy cost, equipment, and the depth of the water table. When canal supplies became insufficient or unreliable, farmers turned downward. Beneath the Indus Plains lies one of Pakistan's greatest hidden resources, groundwater, stored in a vast alluvial aquifer. For decades, tube wells allowed farmers to pump water when canals could not deliver enough. This transformed agriculture again. Groundwater offered flexibility. A canal follows a rotation. A pump can be switched on when a crop needs water, provided the farmer has access to a well and can afford the energy. Pumping helped increase yields, support multiple crops, and protect farms during dry periods. It also supplied drinking water to towns and villages. The scale of dependence is enormous. Groundwater provides most rural domestic water, a large majority of domestic supply nationally, and more than half of agricultural water in many estimates. The aquifer stores vastly more fresh water than Pakistan's major surface reservoirs. An aquifer, however, is not an underground lake with a visible shoreline. Its decline can remain hidden for years. In parts of Punjab, pumping removes water faster than recharge can replace it. Wells deepen, energy costs rise, and small farmers fall behind users who can afford stronger pumps. In other areas, especially parts of Sindh and southern Punjab, groundwater is naturally saline or has become degraded through waterlogging, evaporation, and poor drainage. A farmer may stand above a huge volume of water that cannot safely be applied to crops without damaging the soil. Quality creates another crisis. Groundwater can contain arsenic, fluoride, salts, agricultural chemicals, industrial pollution, or contamination from sewage. A hand pump may produce clear water that looks safe while carrying invisible risks. In cities, leaking water lines and sewers can run beside each other. When pressure drops in a supply pipe, contamination can enter through cracks. The river crisis is therefore also a public health crisis. For a household, scarcity is measured through hours spent collecting water, money paid to a tanker, illness from contamination, or a failed pump. It is also measured by the argument that begins when one neighborhood receives water and another does not. For the family at the canal's tail, groundwater is both insurance and warning. The pump can rescue one crop when surface water arrives late. Each deeper bore, however, transfers the cost of today's shortage into the household's future. Pakistan's cities make these inequalities visible. Lahore grew on the Ravi's floodplain, but much of its modern supply comes from groundwater. As the city expanded, wells drew from the aquifer, pavement reduced recharge, and wastewater entered drains and the river. The Ravi beside Lahore is now, in many stretches and seasons, far smaller and more polluted than its historical identity suggests. A city celebrated for gardens and water architecture has become dependent on pumps beneath the ground. Islamabad and Rawalpindi depend on a mixture of reservoirs and groundwater, but rapid urban growth places increasing pressure on both. Peshawar relies heavily on groundwater. Quetta, outside the main Indus plains, faces an especially severe aquifer crisis in a dry mountain basin where orchards, urban demand, and limited recharge compete. Karachi presents the most dramatic urban contradiction. It is Pakistan's largest city and economic center, located beside the sea, but far from reliable local freshwater. Much of its supply is transferred from the Indus system through lakes, canals, pumping stations, and pipelines. The system must move water across distance into a city of enormous scale. Not everyone in Karachi receives the transferred water equally. Some neighborhoods have pipes, but only intermittent supply. Others depend on tankers, boreholes, shared taps, or informal arrangements. Leakage and theft reduce delivery, while wealth buys storage tanks, filters, pumps, and private deliveries. Poor households can pay more per unit for water of lower quality. In Karachi, a river crisis becomes a street-level market. Water travels not only through pipes but on trucks, and a basic necessity becomes something purchased under pressure. From a night beside a canal to a tanker queue in a megacity, the pattern is the same. The river may exist at national scale while disappearing at the point where a person needs it. The contradiction became impossible to ignore during the 2022 floods. The disaster did not simply place water over dry land. It destroyed homes, roads, schools, clinics, crops, and livestock, while stagnant water created new health risks long after the rain stopped. Heavy monsoon rain fell across regions where drainage, floodplain settlement, damaged infrastructure, and poverty increased exposure. In mountain valleys, flash floods and unstable slopes added another form of danger. In the plains, embankments and roads sometimes protected one place while trapping water in another. A flood is water arriving in the wrong place, at the wrong speed, and in a form that cannot be safely absorbed, stored, or moved. Scarcity is the absence of clean, accessible, predictable water when and where it is required. Reservoirs have limited capacity. Canals are designed for particular flows. Wetlands that once spread and slowed water have been reduced. After a flood, water may continue to the sea, evaporate, become contaminated, or remain over fields where it prevents the next crop from being planted. The tail-end household can therefore experience both disasters. One season, the channel may arrive too late to save a crop. Another season, water can cover the home and field with no safe way to drain it. Too little control and too much control can fail the same family in different months. Pakistan must prepare for too much water and too little water at the same time. Climate change intensifies both risks, but not through one simple prediction. The northern mountains contain one of the greatest concentrations of ice outside the polar regions. Snow and glacier melt are crucial to the Indus, especially because they help sustain flows during the hot season when agricultural demand is high. But the glaciers do not all behave identically. Some parts of the Karakoram have shown relative stability or even temporary gains compared with widespread retreat elsewhere, a pattern sometimes called the Karakoram anomaly. Other glaciers are losing mass. Local snowfall, elevation, debris cover, temperature, and weather patterns create different outcomes across the region. The important point is not that every glacier will disappear on the same schedule. It is that the frozen water system is becoming less predictable. Warmer temperatures can increase melt in the near term, adding water and raising flood risk. They can also expand glacial lakes and destabilize slopes. Over longer periods, sustained ice loss can reduce the natural storage that supports summer flow. Changes in winter snow may matter as much as changes in glacier area. Rain may fall where snow once accumulated, producing immediate runoff instead of water stored for spring and summer. For communities in mountain valleys, these changes are not abstract. A glacial lake outburst can destroy bridges, roads, fields, homes, and power infrastructure within hours. A landslide can block a river, creating a temporary lake that later releases. A damaged road can isolate a village and disrupt trade far beyond the valley. For farmers, hundreds of kilometers downstream, the same changes appear as uncertainty in canal supply. Pakistan built dams partly to manage this uncertainty. Tarbela Dam, completed in the 1970s, became a central structure in the national water and power system. Its reservoir stores Indus water for irrigation releases and supports hydropower generation. Mangla Dam on the Jhelum performs similar roles. Together with barrages, link canals and power stations, these projects helped make modern Pakistan possible. But every reservoir begins filling with sediment from the day a river enters it. The Indus carries material eroded from young, steep mountains. Silt, sand, and gravel settle as the current slows behind a dam. Over decades, this reduces storage capacity and affects operations. Sediment management is therefore not a minor maintenance issue. It is a race between the life of infrastructure and the geology of the mountains. Pakistan has raised Mangla and expanded hydropower at Tarbela. It is also constructing new large projects, including the Diama Basha Dam upstream of Tarbela, with the goals of adding storage, generating electricity, and helping manage sediment and floods. Supporters of new dams see storage as essential. Pakistan's river flows are seasonal. Population is growing. Existing reservoirs are aging, and electricity demand is large. Without additional capacity, they argue, too much water passes during high flow periods, while farms and cities face shortages later. Critics point to the financial cost, long construction periods, displacement of communities, ecological disruption, seismic risk, loss of archaeological sites, sediment, evaporation, and the danger of treating construction as a substitute for reform. Both arguments contain truth. Pakistan needs infrastructure, and it also needs to use existing water better. A new reservoir can shift water through time, but it cannot repair every leaking urban pipe, regulate every groundwater pump, change every crop incentive, or restore trust between provinces. A dam can reduce some flood risks while creating new consequences upstream and downstream. Pakistan was built through water engineering. The harder question is whether it can move from an age of expansion into an age of management. That transition is politically difficult because water connects every region while benefiting them differently. Punjab contains most of Pakistan's irrigated agriculture and a large share of its population. Sindh lies downstream and depends on flows passing through or beside Punjab before reaching its fields and delta. Khyber Pakhtunkhwa holds important upper basin geography and hydropower sites. Balochistan receives smaller allocations from the Indus system, while also facing severe local scarcity and groundwater decline. In 1991, Pakistan's provinces agreed on a framework for dividing Indus waters. The accord remains central to allocation, and the Indus River System Authority manages distribution among provinces. No formula can eliminate mistrust during shortage. Sindh fears that upstream withdrawals can leave too little for its farms and delta. Punjab argues that its vast agricultural system requires dependable supply and that losses and measurement problems complicate accusations. Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa raise concerns about infrastructure, access, hydropower, and shares that cannot always be used because the necessary channels do not exist. Disputes intensify when flows fall and provinces disagree over gauges, losses, unauthorized withdrawals, and how shortages should be divided. Technology can help. Telemetry, satellite monitoring, automated gates, transparent data, and independent auditing can make flows more visible. But data alone cannot create trust when institutions are contested. A number on a screen becomes credible only when all sides believe the system producing it is fair. The conflict also exists within provinces. A large farmer at a canal head does not experience the same river as a small farmer at its tail. A city receiving a new supply line does not experience the same river as the village beside the source. An industrial user with a private borehole does not experience the same aquifer as a household whose shallow hand pump has failed. Water inequality follows power, and nowhere is that more visible than in the lower basin. This becomes clearest in the lower basin, where the Indus approaches the sea. Historically, the river delivered not only fresh water to the delta, but sediment. That sediment built land. It renewed soils, formed mudflats, supported mangroves, and helped the coast resist erosion and saltwater intrusion. Dams and barrages now trap or divert much of what once moved downstream. Irrigation withdrawals reduce freshwater flow, especially during dry periods. The sea pushes inland through creeks and channels. Salt enters agricultural land and groundwater. Villages lose drinking water. Fishing grounds change. Families move toward towns and Karachi. The delta does not fail in one visible collapse. It retreats through thousands of small losses. A field produces less. A well becomes salty. A creek widens. A boat travels farther for fish. A family abandons a house after repeated flooding. A young person leaves because the local economy no longer offers a future. Mangrove forests stand between land and sea. Their roots trap sediment, shelter fish, support coastal livelihoods, store carbon, and reduce the force of waves. Pakistan has carried out major mangrove planting and restoration efforts, and satellite images show important recovery in some areas. Planting trees, however, cannot replace a river. Mangroves need the right balance of sediment, tides, salinity, and freshwater. A plantation may survive while the wider delta continues to lose land and ecological complexity. Restoration must include environmental flows, not only saplings. The lower Indus is also home to one of the world's rarest river mammals, the Indus River dolphin. Once able to move across a much larger river range, dolphins became separated by barrages into isolated sections. Conservation efforts have helped protect populations in some stretches, but the species remains endangered and vulnerable to low flows, fishing nets, pollution, and fragmentation. The dolphin reveals what infrastructure maps often hide. A barrage may deliver water to millions while dividing a living river into compartments. The challenge is not to remove every structure, but to recognize that a river carries more than water through gates. It carries sediment, fish, nutrients, livelihoods, culture, memory, and the possibility of reaching the sea. The Indus has always changed, but human control has reduced the space in which it can change safely. Floodplains have been settled, embankments have confined channels, wetlands have been drained or disconnected. Crops and buildings occupy land that the river may reclaim during an extreme event. When disaster comes, people often describe the river as invading. From the river's perspective, it may be returning to an old path. Allowing more room for rivers can reduce risk. Restored wetlands can absorb floodwater. Designated flood bypasses can protect dense settlements. Stronger building rules can keep new construction away from the most dangerous zones. Forecasting and evacuation systems can save lives even when floods cannot be prevented. But relocation is never simple. A floodplain may be dangerous and still be the only land a poor family can afford. An informal settlement may lack legal status, but contain homes, schools, work, and community. Telling people to move without offering secure alternatives simply transfers risk from water to poverty. Pakistan's water crisis is therefore not an engineering problem alone. It is a governance problem, an agricultural problem, an energy problem, an urban planning problem, an environmental problem, and a question of social justice. It is also a problem of national imagination. For much of the 20th century, progress meant irrigating more land, building larger dams, drilling more wells, producing more crops, and supplying growing cities. That expansion created real benefits, but it has physical limits. There is only so much river flow to divide. Groundwater cannot fall forever. Salty soils do not recover through optimism. Reservoirs cannot hold unlimited sediment, and a delta cannot survive indefinitely without fresh water. The next era must measure success differently. A farmer producing the same crop with less water creates national value even when no new canal appears on a map. A city repairing leaks may gain more usable water than it would from a distant new supply project. Agriculture offers the largest opportunity because it uses most of Pakistan's managed water. Better land leveling, improved scheduling, suitable drip or sprinkler systems, healthier soils, and more resilient seeds can reduce demand in the right places. No technology works everywhere. Drip systems require filtration, maintenance, energy, training, and capital. Canal lining can save water locally, but reduce recharge to wells. Efficiency can even encourage expansion, consuming the water that was supposedly saved. Real conservation requires measurement, incentives, and limits. Crop policy matters just as much. Rice or sugarcane may make sense in one location and impose an unsustainable cost in another. Farmers cannot be ordered into different crops without different markets. They need buyers, storage, transport, credit, insurance, research, and reliable prices. Otherwise, the safer national crop remains the riskier household decision. Groundwater requires a new social agreement. Monitoring must reveal how quickly levels and quality are changing, while regulation must distinguish between a small farmer protecting a harvest and a powerful user extracting at industrial scale. For the household at the canal's tail, reform must feel like greater security, not a lecture about sacrifice. A reliable schedule, affordable technology, a market for less thirsty crops, and protection from stronger upstream users matter more than slogans about efficiency. Cities need their own transformation, reliable pressure, leak detection, protected sources, fair service standards, wastewater treatment, and carefully designed metering can reduce contamination and inequality. Treated wastewater can support industry, landscaping, or agriculture near cities. Rainwater harvesting, permeable surfaces, restored drains, parks, wetlands, and retention basins can slow storms and help recharge groundwater instead of sending every downpour into flooded streets. In the mountains, adaptation means better monitoring of snow, glaciers, lakes, weather, and landslides. Early warnings must reach communities in forms they trust, while roads, bridges, and power projects must be designed for extremes that historical averages may no longer describe. Across the country, water data must become easier to share and harder to manipulate. Provinces need confidence in flow measurements. Farmers need clear schedules. Citizens need to know whether drinking water is safe. Transparency cannot create water, but it can reduce the waste created by suspicion. Pakistan must also stop treating every drop reaching the sea as wasted. Fresh water below the final barrage blocks salt, carries sediment, sustains fisheries, supports mangroves, and helps preserve coastal land. Water reaching a wetland or delta is still performing economic work. Programs such as Living Indus reflect this wider view by linking wetlands, forests, floodplains, and the delta. Their success will depend less on impressive targets than on whether restoration changes actual decisions about flow, land, and pollution. The basin also crosses an international border. Since 1960, the Indus Waters Treaty has provided rules, procedures, and channels of communication between India and Pakistan across a river system divided by partition. The agreement was designed in a different climate, political era, and level of demand. Disputes over dams, design, interpretation, data, and security have repeatedly tested it. Yet the geography has never offered either country an escape from cooperation. Pakistan's farms, reservoirs, and power system depend heavily on the western rivers covered by the treaty. India has communities, development needs, and energy projects in the upper basin. Public threats cannot change the fact that water, weather, sediment, and flood risk cross political lines. No treaty can solve every conflict between two rival states, but shared forecasting can improve flood warning, transparent data can reduce suspicion, and technical dialogue can preserve a minimum of predictability when wider relations deteriorate. Climate pressure makes those functions more important, not less. Pakistan's deepest water threat does not come from one foreign dam, one province, one crop, one city, or one season. It comes from the interaction of all of them. Population growth increases demand. Urbanization concentrates it. Agriculture consumes the largest share. Inequality decides who feels shortage first. Climate change makes supply more variable. Weak treatment turns available water into unsafe water. Groundwater pumping hides scarcity until wells fail. Dams trap sediment. Canals sustain farms while reducing delta flows. Political mistrust delays reform. This complexity can create paralysis. Build a dam, and people debate cost and displacement. Raise water prices, and farmers fear ruin. Regulate wells, and users resist. Change crops, and markets may fail. Release water to the delta, and irrigators ask which fields should receive less. Yet refusing to choose allows the strongest users to continue taking water, while the weakest absorb the shortage. The future of the Indus will be decided through millions of choices that appear smaller than a river. A repaired gate, a protected recharge zone, a tested school well, an accurate gauge, a restored wetland, or a crop that earns more from less water can change the system one decision at a time. None of these actions is cinematic on its own. Together, they determine whether Pakistan remains productive, habitable, and politically stable. Return to the river's journey. In the north, morning light reaches glacier ice above a dark valley. Meltwater gathers beneath stones and enters a stream. The stream joins another, descending past villages, orchards, bridges, roads, and power stations. At Tarbela, water slows behind a wall built by a previous generation. Gates release it according to storage, demand, weather, and judgment. Downstream, the river widens across the plains. At a barrage, part of the flow turns into a canal. It passes wheat fields, mango orchards, cotton plants, sugar mills, roads, and settlements. It divides again and again until one narrow watercourse approaches the household waiting at the tail. The family watches the field darken as water moves across the soil. For them, the Indus is not an ancient civilization, a treaty, or a climate model. It is the difference between harvest and debt, between remaining on the land and leaving it. Farther south, the river passes Sukur, where the Great Barrage has directed water into Sindh's agricultural network for generations. Date palms rise near the banks, and beyond the irrigated zone, the ground turns dry with startling speed. Below Kotri, the river enters its final struggle. In a wet year, water may spread through channels toward the sea. In a dry year, channels become shallow or saline. Mangrove roots hold mud against the tide, while fishing families look upstream toward decisions made far away. The Indus reaches the Arabian Sea, carrying what remains after mountains, dams, turbines, canals, farms, cities, industries, and politics have taken their share. A river reaching the sea is not a failure of management. It is the completion of a system, and Pakistan must understand that before the delta becomes a memory. The country was created around a river, but it cannot save itself by controlling the river more tightly at every point. Total control is an illusion. Mountains release water according to climate. Sediment moves according to gravity. Floods search for space. Aquifers respond slowly to pumping. The sea enters wherever freshwater pressure weakens. The wiser goal is balance, storing water without forgetting sediment, irrigating land without exhausting soil, pumping groundwater without stealing from the future, and protecting cities without erasing the spaces floods need. It means generating power without treating ecosystems as empty, sharing water among provinces without dividing the nation, growing food without pretending every crop belongs in every climate, and cooperating across borders without surrendering legitimate interests. These tasks are harder than building one more canal. They require institutions capable of thinking beyond an election, a harvest, a drought, or a flood. They require people to see water not as an unlimited inheritance, but as a shared system shaped by every decision upstream. Pakistan's strength is that it already knows how to live through extremes. Farmers adapt to unreliable canals. Mountain communities read snow and weather. Engineers operate an immense network. Scientists monitor glaciers and aquifers. Delta communities restore mangroves. Cities improvise supply under extraordinary pressure. Improvisation, however, is not security. A nation of roughly 250 million people cannot rely forever on deeper wells, emergency tankers, temporary embankments, and the hope that next year's river will behave like last year's. The Indus does not need to disappear completely for Pakistan to face catastrophe. It only needs to become less reliable than the systems built around it. That is what running dry truly means here. A river can remain visible from space, but absent from a village tap. Water can stand behind a barrage, but fail to reach the end of a canal. A flooded district can be followed by a failed crop, while an aquifer still exists, but has become too saline or deep for a poor farmer. It means a delta still printed on maps after freshwater no longer reaches it often enough to hold back the sea. Pakistan's story is often told through borders, faith, military power, cities, mountains, and conflict. Beneath all of them runs a more fundamental story. A river begins in ice, crosses contested highlands, enters dams, divides into canals, disappears into crops and cities, returns through drains and groundwater, and struggles toward the sea. Around that movement, a nation eats, works, argues, remembers, and imagines its future. Pakistan was built around the Indus. Whether it can rebuild its relationship with the river will decide what kind of country remains when the water reaches the next